The Sine Institute of Policy and Politics is American University's incubator for policy innovation. We convene leaders in the academic, public, private, nonprofit, and journalism sectors to engage and promote common ground and nonpartisan solutions. In an evolving world, we seize the opportunity to work on the nation's most pressing challenges through collaboration by experts and top scholars in their field with students in research and scholarship. As part of that goal, the Sine Institute leverages American University's location in our nation's capital, the nexus of government and a growing international business center. We connect diverse perspectives from around the country and around the world with our world-class academics and research, experienced practitioners, and the most politically active student body in the U.S. We stand apart through our focus on the role of business and the nonprofit community in public policy, the rise of the importance of economic regions in the United States, and international policy issues. Our focus is to make an immediate impact at the intersection of policy and politics that leads to real and lasting change. Thank you for joining us as we convene, communicate, and collaborate. Introducing Sine Institute Fellow 2022, Barbara Comstock.
Good afternoon, and I'm delighted to be with you both in person and virtually for this great program of experts that we have on dealing with women in Afghanistan and the importance of the role of women in leadership in order to have peace and stability in Afghanistan. And really, it's something we know throughout the world is so needed. And for the past 20 years, we have all been engaged really on a bipartisan basis. I was in the Bush administration when all of this started, and I know it has continued both with Laura Bush and with Secretary Clinton and with people throughout administrations to really work together on the importance of the role of women in Afghanistan. So I am going to kick it right over to our expert today, Sara Greengrass, who is the Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, which was founded in 2002, so almost 20 years ago. And it's a nonpartisan public-private partnership that supports Afghan women and girls in education, healthcare, economic empowerment, and leadership. And Sara herself has a great role in leadership as a lawyer and in the Foreign Service and in this role she's in now. So we are delighted to hear from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Ramadan Kareem to those observing. Thank you so much for welcoming me here today and to the Sine Institute for your hospitality. As the Honorable Barbara Comstock just said, my name is Sara Greengrass and I'm Executive Director of the U.S. Afghan Women's Council, which is a bipartisan public-private partnership that has for 20 years worked to advance and elevate Afghan women and girls, a mission that we continue to do today. It's a pleasure to be introducing today's program, particularly as it elevates not only women's voices, but those of two Afghan women who I'm honored to share this stage with, Laila Jafari and Fatema Ahmadi. It's a pleasure. Before getting into the present situation, I'd like to address a few indicators of the significant progress Afghan women and the country of Afghanistan had made prior to August of last year. Between 2002 and 2015, the percentage of pregnant women receiving prenatal care by skilled personnel rose from 16 to 61%. While estimates vary, at the top of the range, some studies showed that women were 50% more likely to survive birth or pregnancy-related complications than they were in 2002. In education, student enrollment grew from 900,000 male students in 2001 to more than 9.5 million students, 39% of whom were girls in 2020. In higher education, numbers increased significantly as well. Prior to 2001, most business women worked in handicrafts, did not speak English, and did not know how to use a computer. They had since expanded into a variety of sectors, including information technology, accounting, electrical engineering, manufacturing, food processing, and more. An analysis published in January 2021 of women's business in a women's business database created and maintained by the Afghan Women's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, founded by a USAWC member, showed that the majority of women-owned businesses in Afghanistan were less than 5 years old. This information, drawn from more than 17,639 businesses in Afghanistan, means that most women had tenaciously started their businesses amid considerable insecurity and worsening economic conditions following the 2014 drawdown of international troops and development assistance. It's not a secret that Afghanistan is currently facing a liquidity crisis, and women throughout the country have been stopped from working in all but a few areas. According to the most recent World Food Program data, based on survey data from February 2022, results showed a continued decline in food and nutrition status for those responding, indicating a deepening food security crisis. 95% of the population continues to face inadequate food consumption as household income levels and opportunities continue to decline. More than 85% of households previously earning income reported no income earned at all during the month of February. Almost 100% of female-headed households surveyed are facing insufficient food consumption. Female-headed households are more likely to employ crisis coping strategies compared to male-headed households. Moreover, in just the last 2 weeks, the Taliban stopped girls above 6th grade from returning to school and had stopped international media from being allowed to actively participate and for airing their programs in Afghanistan. As U.S. Special Representative Rina Amari noted last week, repressing Afghan women and girls is not a substitute for governance. To end the war and move Afghanistan towards sustainability, girls must be back in school, mobility constraints removed, and women back in the workforce. Create a culture of hope rather than one of fear. Such policies do not bode well for supporting women's irreplaceable contributions and involvement at all levels of society, politically, economically, socially, and otherwise. Afghan women have critical skills, knowledge, expertise, and insights that must be centered in order to address these and other formidable challenges facing Afghanistan. It is in this context that hearing from Afghan women directly remains so important. We often say that women should have a seat at the table, but more importantly, others at the table have to be willing to listen to them, implement their ideas and policy recommendations, and expand the table to allow for an even broader and deeper discussion. The U.S. Afghan Women's Council has worked to do that and to build better tables, so to speak, through access to healthcare, education, political and civil leadership training, and via programs to expand women's economic opportunity. It is a true pleasure to be here today with women leaders who have done the same, both here in the United States and in Afghanistan. And I greatly look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, I guess next I will introduce Fatema Ahmadi, who is at the U.S. Institute for Peace officer, and she was a peace program officer preparing young people and young women on nonviolent responses. And also in her career, she's been involved in United Nations High Commission for Refugees and also worked on human trafficking. And she's an Afghan Women's Fellow here at the School of Public Affairs. So we'll kick it over to you.
Thank you very much for the invitation today for this event. And thank you very much for the Sine Institute and providing this opportunity for us to come and talk to you directly. I think this is a very important time to deliver our messages to people here, because we think Afghanistan needs support from the international community more than ever now. And all of you here, I believe you have a great energy and support for, and also I would say, capacity to change every other life in, other countries or beyond the United States. So because of that, I think it's very important for me as an Afghan woman now here to advocate for the life of people in Afghanistan. The Taliban came 2000, just last August 2021. It wasn't choice of Afghan people, and it's not. Just today, Afghan women in one of the provinces tear down all of the banners and everything of Taliban. The Taliban invited them for advocating for girls' school today, but they bravely did it. I lived under the authoritarian regime. I lived under Taliban. I know what does it mean. It's just so much courageous that Afghan women did today. I'm delivering this today to you because whatever happened to women and girls in Afghanistan and to population who are living right now under Taliban, you can change it. Definitely. You have lawmakers, you have Congress, you have democracy here, you have the government that's listening to people. Everything that's happening from your government that you think is not fair to people in Afghanistan, I think we need to raise our voice here. And we need to emphasize on people's dignity to live under a peaceful government. Before the Taliban, we had 6.5% of women in ministerial government organizations. We had women working in high-level positions. We had women traveling, to different provinces, despite all of the, insecurity we had because of the Taliban and threats and everything. But we traveled, we talked to our communities, we delivered projects and programs to very remote areas of Afghanistan. And it wasn't for nothing. As Sarah mentioned, we did a lot of changes. We just witnessed it. And when I returned to Afghanistan from Iran, I was like, shocked how women and men can do these things in Afghanistan. It's very hard. We have limited resources. We have limited support from everyone. You can imagine people, if you want to go to school, right now the government is not supporting, then your family is not supporting, the community is not supporting. School is just a fundamental right for everyone. But just imagine living in this situation that no one is supporting you for anything. But we Afghan people, they did it, especially women. We ran for parliament. We just participated in peace processes in Afghanistan that wasn't very successful, but we did a lot of work. And when I was actually working with the Institute of Peace in Afghanistan, I was managing different projects with different categories of people. I traveled to one of the remote areas and I just sat down with women who actually were the first victims of this conflict in Afghanistan. She was crying and telling me that I lost one of my sons in a battle with Taliban. He was a Taliban member. And she said, I had another one who is also a Taliban member, and I have one with the government. And the reason that she was crying was, she said, for many years, I couldn't see my children with me in the same room. Really hard, right? Just imagining yourself and not seeing your children together because of instability, because unpeaceful situation we have. And still we having this. Right now it's not, the conflict is stopped because a new people came on power, but it's not peace in Afghanistan. Still people fighting, still people, resisting against this government because they came and they just denied all of the rights of people. We don't have right now freedom of speech. We don't have, women don't have freedom of movement. Women cannot leave the country without a male person, which is a huge barrier for women to live in this situation. I know many of my friends, they wanted to leave, at least going to a near country, from there maybe going to another country, but they couldn't. And everything actually turned really hard for us. One of the Taliban member in the talk show, he was a supporter, and he said, women, women are belongs to homes, houses, or to grave. This is very hard to hear, but they're practicing this on women of Afghanistan right now. So what I want to emphasize today is really, an idea of women's participation politically, making more stable and gender equality more, progressive and everything. Oh, but it's very important, as Sarah said, it's very important people listen to who wants to change the situation, the status quo. If you just hear it and then pass it, do not pay attention to what is happening on another part of the world, it's not making any difference. But when you listen and you just pass it to other people, this is happening in Afghanistan. This is happening, this is people's desire for change. So whenever we can, whoever is possible to just push on them. It's a parliament member, it's a lawmakers, or any people in government who can make this change possible. You can do it. Someone asked one of the members of Taliban, what is your view about women in as a minister? And he said, you are asking, you are asking women to do something that they cannot. So the default is they cannot do these things. They shouldn't, even not trying. But before we did, we had 27% of our parliament were women, which is close to this situation here, right?
Yes,
It was
a little over
actually
30 in Congress, but yes.
Yeah. So how you can just say that women cannot do it when they just did it? And we had women, at least 2 women from each province. We have 34 provinces in Afghanistan. We had at least 2 women from each province. We had seats in parliament. And equal to men, we just fought for everything, like any injustice in our country, we raised our voice. So I don't know, women change? No. Women have more education, women have more capacity right now. Women have, they had more opportunities, they have allies in the country. So what has been changed in country is just the people who came and they want to put women down. Right now, Afghanistan is the only country that girls over 6th grade cannot go to school. Just imagine it. Only country in the world, and we are not the only Islamic country. We have a lot of good examples of Islamic countries that women are prime ministers, women are in politics, women are leaders of different offices. So we are now outside of Afghanistan because of that threat that they're very possible to every leader of Afghanistan, but we are not stopping advocating for it. And people in Afghanistan, women just going to streets every day. Everything that they just stop for women, they go and protest for their rights. I think it's very powerful in a country that you are sure that if something happened, there's no media to cover. There's and men are not really. Sometimes I could say they're not really supportive to say, okay, this happened to this woman, I'm gonna go and fight for it. It's not happening, unfortunately. Women are the only maybe 20 or 30 people outside of going to the street and demanding their rights. I don't see men coming with them. It's very, in my view, when we are talking about a community that living together, a man or woman should fight for every person's right. As a woman, I understand what is the situation if you don't have freedom of mobility. But a man who has everything maybe cannot understand my situation.
Well, could you speak to obviously how you yourself came to your leadership role and how that impacted women as you were traveling around and saw that, how that kind of generated, just sort of I can do it and engagement. And now how, with their regressing, what can we do? But just maybe walk us through what you saw with your action and your leadership and how, and the dangers you faced too with it, because obviously for many of the women now, as well as earlier, there was a lot of danger involved in this too.
Right. Well, I would start my opening about my journey to become a leader with great mentorship. I had a great mentor who believed in me first and gave that big project to me between others. And she said, you can do it. I was not actually, I'd never done that before, but she believed in me. She knew something, she saw something. And then when I started, I heard, from some of the male colleagues that this is a big project they are giving to this, I'm from minority group, to this, young lady, Hazara. She cannot travel, she cannot do this. I heard it from them. But that project, when we finished it, they call it Small Afghanistan, because we had people from every corner of the country. We had diversity. We have different ages.
So you did travel. You were able to travel.
In that position, I
when
traveled
you
a lot.
started doing that, what did you have to do? How did that progress?
First, it was really difficult because when you want to be a leader, you need to bring everyone in the same picture. Pulling all of them together, so they can listen to you, follow you. First, I start just going to understand my colleagues. When I hired them with a team, I was like, okay, let's see who is this person and how this, I can make connection with this person, individual, not as a team. And then seeing as a bigger picture, like I have this person, that person, so they are just putting, can fit this here, this person can fit there. And I wasn't just sitting and ordering tasks to this and that. I was doing everything with them when I started. So because I had to make that kind of trust between our team members. And then we had a very good connection and relationship within the team. And we start traveling to border provinces and borders with the neighboring countries. And I travel with them too. In one of the provinces, my team traveled and they called me, there's no hotel here. they are just traffickers. I asked the office, I should travel tomorrow because they didn't want to come back. They said, we want to find a place to stay with a friend or, like some of the members we know, but we want to stay. But the fact that I hear there are traffickers, actual traffickers in the town, make me really worried about my team. So I traveled to the province. I got a letter from the Sine, from Kabul, from the Sine, the capital, one of the ministries that was the line ministry for us. And then I went to when I went to the province, we went to the governor, and he provided us a safe places. It's challenging to be a leader. It's really
You
challenging.
didn't take no for an answer.
Yeah, and they're just looking at you for everything. When you should have answer for everything. And sometimes you think, okay, I really don't know what is the answer. But you're just looking in your head, like you're just getting like a good navigator to see what is happening here. So what is the best answer for this? And then I joined, when I came here, I did a fellowship with the American University School of Law. And then it was a one-year program. I returned to Afghanistan, worked with the peace process. In that capacity, actually, I experienced, unfortunately, so much discrimination. And
Can you give us some examples of what that was like?
well, firstly, as a woman, really, I was like, because I did that role before joining USAP, I experienced a great support from my mentors and from the leadership of the office. But after that, I experienced, when they say women's experiencing discrimination, is really happening. And I really personally went through it. It's really hard to explain it, but it's happening. It's happening here, it's happening everywhere. And in countries like Afghanistan, foreigners just easily can say, you cannot demand equal rights in a country like Afghanistan. I heard it from my colleague, foreigners, that telling me, you cannot demanding this. So but it's everyday fight, right? It's happening here. And I think right now Afghan women are pushing back, but we just using every single opportunity to just bring everyone else with us and just going forward. It's not end of my country. This is a good thing about democracy. You're learning and you're loving it and you want to practice it. Now we want to practice it.
Ask a question just about the mentors, since there's so few women in leadership in your country. Were your mentors women, or were they just men who realized that women should have an opportunity?
Well, it's very hard to find men as mentor because many of them don't understand your obstacles. But I had good women mentors. Yeah,
And
but
what was,
very good.
and what was their role that they were able to be a mentor for? What has
So-
their experience been?
Yeah, they were seniors than me, and they were from other countries, but they've been in Afghanistan more than 10 years or 15 years, and they knew my community very well. They experienced it to be in Afghanistan. So so that's why they knew what is happening. So they were happy to support us, but it was really hard for them too. I understand it's not easy to be in one diverse office and be willing to support an Afghan woman.
Why don't we let, I will
Thank you very
introduce
much.
Laila, and then we'll open it up to discussion and more questions, and obviously get pronounce your name correctly, Laila? Or Laila?
Laila.
Laila. Laila Jafari is a prominent civil society and women's rights activist in Afghanistan, and she is also a member of High Peace Council, a government body constituted to facilitate peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban. In addition to that, before the fall of the Afghan government, she had worked as the director of political organizations and integration of civil society institutions at the State Ministry for Peace, where those organizations and institutions are given the opportunity to take part in the intra-Afghan peace negotiations to represent those Afghans who are now left behind. So we will turn it over to you to tell us of your experience. And again, we'd just love to hear about, those are obviously very significant leadership roles that you've played in a short time, because you both are very young, or at least appear to me. So to have this very deep experience and to have been in these difficult leadership roles in very challenging times. Look forward to hearing your story.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for conference. I'm so sorry. My language is not good. And please, Fatema, help me. Thank you. دوباره من میخوایم تشکر کنم از خانم سارا. خود دانشگاه ایو، دولت آمریکا و مردم آمریکا که نمونش 2 زن افغان اینجا از کمک کردیم که ما سیو هستیم.
So she's starting with saying, thank you very much for today's conference event, and thank you to the Sine Institute, EU, and government of America, and also the people of America for helping Afghans. And we are some of those who received that support from Americans.
تشکر. فاطمه خیلی چیزا رو با شما شریک کرد، به خاطر که فاطمه با اینکه خیلی جوان است اما کارهای زیادی رو در افغانستان انجام داده در قسمت بحث پروسه صلح و خودش به عنوان یک زن جوان و یک زن رهبر خیلی موارد رو به شما گفت. در اون مورد اگر باز شما سوال خاصی از من داشتید من میگم براتون جواب میدم.
So she's saying, Fatima, I told many things about the situation of women in Afghanistan, and she's really kind to me. She said she's young, but she did a lot of positions. I'm not so young. My face is very young. And she's saying, this is the same story, but if you want, if you have further questions, you can ask related to those experiences. We are just went through the same, situation, kind of.
Yes. شما و مردم دنیا بعضی چیزها رو از تلویزیون دیدین 15 اگست، اما من و فاطمه از قلب میدان هوایی کابل افغانستان آمدیم. بعد از خدا پلیس سربازای شما دولت شما بود که ما رو کمک کرد و ما سیو هستیم.
So she's saying, you heard the story about the collapse of Afghanistan from the media, but we've been through it. We came to the airport, we just faced that chaos, and we received support from American armies and troops there. We are now here.
کابل ظرف چند ساعت سقوط کرد. من اون روز به وظیفه رفته بودم، اما شاید 4 ساعت از رسمیات گذاشته بود. من فکر کردم که جهان تمام شده وقتی وضعیت در افغانستان کابل را تمام شد.
So the day that Afghanistan took over by the Taliban, we were to our offices like normal, but after 4 hours, the day started after 4 hours of the day, it was middle of the day that it happened. Everywhere, very unrest. The Kabul, the capital Kabul was really on turmoil and very hard. And she said, I felt that it was end of the war.
Yes. بدبختانه ما برگشتیم به 20 سال پیش افغانستان. به 20 سال تاریکی، بیسوادی، خشونت بازگشت.
Unfortunately, we went back 20 years past, and Afghanistan now it's facing poverty, uneducation, and unsafety. Is peace.
Yes. اما ما میخوایم از شما نسل جوان و تحصیل کرده آمریکا و تمام بزرگانی که اینجا هستیم، آمریکا نباید برگرده به 20 سال پیش، به حادثه 11 سپتامبر 2001. و حادثه باید برای مردم و دولت آمریکا نباید تکرار شود.
So she's saying we went back 20 years, but the US shouldn't go back to 20 years ago. 9/11, another 9/11 shouldn't happen. So every one of you has that capacity to prevent.
در 20 سالی که در افغانستان ما زندگی کردیم، زندگی انسانی تری کردیم، ما مردم افغانستان قدردان خون تک تک سربازای امریکایی و افغان هستیم، چون اینا خون دادن که زنان و مردان افغانستان آزادی را، حقوق بشر را، دموکراسی را تمثیل کردن.
And she is saying that she's appreciating all of the people who lost their lives in Afghanistan, Americans and the Afghan army, because they were there to fight, and people of Afghanistan with support of Americans and international allies could live a better life.
باید شما بخواین از دولتتان که باید مانع شود از اینکه تروریسم در منطقه گسترش پیدا بکنه، ترویج پیدا کنه، چون وقتی که در منطقه با تروریسم افزایش پیدا بکنه با برگشت طالبان، مطمئن باشین که خطرات از این تروریسم به مرزهای امریکا و اروپا هم خواهد رسید.
So she's saying people here should act against terrorism, because it's not only in Afghanistan, it's going, beyond the region, and it's just coming everywhere, to the US, to the Europe. So you can expect it everywhere. When everyone allows a terrorist group come to power and stay in power.
که متاسفانه بحث روسیه و اوکراین را میتونیم یکی از نمونه‌هاش بگیم، بحث افراطیت ایران را میتونیم یک نمونهش بگیم، بحث امروز پاکستان را میتونیم یک نمونهش بگیم که تروریسم در حال گسترش است و این خطرناک است برای دنیا.
She's saying about the Iranian government is one example of extremism and situation between Ukraine and Russia. Is another example of the unsafe and terrorist groups everywhere.
در این قسمت فقط میخوایم بحث مهمی هست که همه ما صدا شویم که ایالات متحده آمریکا طالب را نباید، یعنی بحث ایدئولوژی طالبان نباید ترویج بکنه و همونطوری که مردم افغانستان در 20 سال تنها نگذاشت، بعد از این هم نباید تنها بگذارد، چه زن چه مرد افغانستان.
So she's urging Americans to not, leaving Afghans alone in this hard situation and not recognizing the Taliban government.
Thank you. ما یک تجربه خودم میخوایم از ملاقاتی که با طالبان در سال 2019 در کشور قطر داشتم را میخوایم با شما شریک کنم.
She wants to share and it's her experience meeting Taliban members in Doha with you in 2019.
حالا من بعد از 3 سال یا 4 سال میفهمم که طالبا چرا عالی در مکتبا رو بسته نمیگذاره دخترها بیشتر از 6 درس.
She's saying after 3 years now I understand why the Taliban members closed down and banned school for girls.
شب اولی که ما رفتیم با طالبا ما در سالن بودیم طالبا همینطور گروپی که تو تلویزیون نشون میدن آمدن بعد از میزی که 2-3 میز مردا بود با اونا سلام علیک کردن بعد میزی که ما 11 زن بودیم در میز ما آمدن.
So she's saying one of the nights the Taliban member came to it was a big room, you know, men sitting on one table and women with themselves in one table. So they came and greet the men and then they greet the women too. به شما آمدن؟
بله بعد از که 2-3 میز سر رویشون مردا بود بعد میز ما بود و آمدن به طرف میز ما برای سلام علیک. And بعد از این که بسیار البته محترمانه hello how are you sisters and اما یک چیز جمله‌ای که گفت و اونجا ما رو تکان داد این بود که عباس استانکزی که در اون تیم گفتگو چی مذاکره طالبا هست به ما گفتش که اینطور گفت عباس استانکزی که به ما گفتن که این دفعه زنای خطرناک آمدن به این گفتگو.
So she's saying when they came to us, one of the Taliban members of negotiation team, is very famous, Abbas Istanbul. He said, "We heard that dangerous women are coming, so you are the dangerous woman."
Yes.
Here's to dangerous women.
حالا من میفهمم که چرا ما را زنای خطرناک گفت. به خاطری که واقعا به جز من کوچک همشون بودم. زنهای تحصیل کرده، زنهای رهبر، زنهای باسواد، زنهایی که همه عمر خود در افغانستان زندگی کرده بودن، اونا آمده بودن تا با طالبا در مورد حقوق انسان و حقوق زن صحبت کنن و حقشان را حمایت کنن.
So now she's saying now I understand why they called us dangerous women because there were women, you know, in age above her, you know, like in leadership, she's saying that above me, and you know, they came. They have been lived in Afghanistan for all of their life, and they faced all of the discrimination, prejudice, and everything. So they lived a difficult life in Afghanistan, but they came to Doha to ask for the basic human rights and women's rights from the Taliban.
یعنی این 20 سال حضور ایالات متحده آمریکا و حامیانش اتحادیه اروپا باعث شده بود که چنین زنان شجاعی رشد بکنن که با طالب روی به روی بشینن. طالب از اینمی وحشت داره.
So she's saying the presence of America, the US, and also the allies actually build that energy and confidence for women to stand against injustice, and you know, to come, you know, they just train to be like that. So she's emphasizing it's really important. It's really powerful.
من و فاطمه نمونه اینمی 20 سال حضور جامعه جهانی که در رأسش ایالات متحده است، ما از دستاوردهای حضور کشورهای حامی حقوق بشر و آزادی و اینا هستیم.
So she's saying we are the example of those who lived 20 years in Afghanistan and experienced democracy, experienced freedom. We are not here.
حالا هم من فهمیدم هم شما فهمیدین که طالب چرا نمیگذاره دختر افغان بیشتر از صنف 6 بخوانه. به خاطر که از زنان باسواد، از زنان آگاه، از زنان رهبر، از زنان توانمند، از زنان آزادیخواه و حقخواه میترسن.
So she's saying now you understand and I understand why the the Taliban's school for girls over 6th grade because they are afraid of empowered women and leaders, female leaders. They're afraid of women to be powerful, to demand, so and also to ask for freedom.
What kind of actions can the international community be taking now? And I think for both of you too, whether it's sanctioning the Taliban leaders in their travels, has been suggested, or sanctioning their finances. Some of the things, what are some of the things that we can do that is going to make, because seeing particularly the lack of education, I know there's been some online education too. What are the things that have any chance of working that we as an international community, and maybe Sara can jump in too with this, because I think and then I think Sara might be able to speak to some of our students about the opportunities in international and foreign service on how students can be helpful for this, because we know these are going to be kind of the careers of the future to, whether we're seeing this here, what we see in Ukraine, but, how can we take these moments and bring some moral clarity to them? Sorry, I went on too long for you to translate.
لیلا جان میگن که به نظرتان چون اینا دانشجوی هستن که قرار است برن با سی دیپارتمان و دیگه جایا کار کنن به عنوان کسایی که مثلا به کشورهای دیگه میرن، میگه پیشنهادتان چی هسته که بر کسایی مثل اینا که بفهمن به عنوان مثلا نقش خود، مثلا نقش آمریکا چی میتونه، نقش کشورهای دیگه چی میتونه، چی کار کردن میتونیم که کمک کنیم، میتونه متفاوت چیزا باشه. کدامش شما پیشنهاد میدین به این؟
بسیار سوال خوب. It's a good question. And چند روزی میشه که ایالات متحده کشت مواد مخدر طالبان کشت مواد مخدر منع کرده، در صورتی که طی از 20 سال بزرگترین حامی اقتصادی طالبان اینمی کشت مواد مخدر بود.
So she's saying the Taliban actually just
رهبرشان بود.
Yeah, the leadership of Taliban just banned all of the opium cultivation all over Afghanistan, while they've been using the money of this great actual trade for their finance over the 40 years of conflict in Afghanistan. But now they just banned it.
این بزرگترین سوال به وجود میاره که اگر بعد از این کشت مواد مخدر توقف کنن، حامی اقتصادی طالبان کی هست؟ طالبی که حداقل حمالی میگن 70,000 عسکر، یک نمی نان خشکمزی در روز چقدر میشه؟ طالب چیزی نداره. افغانستان که الان بودجه‌ای نداره، پولش بلاک هست.
So it's making actually this action making you to question if they ban this great finance hub, how they can continue, who is supporting them. So there is something behind this terrorist group that's supporting them to continue.
شاید شما خیلیتون حدس میزنید، مطالعه دارین، شنیدین، شک‌های زیادی میکنیم که کیها حامی طالب باشه، اما شما به عنوان کسانی که واقعا میخواین کار کنید در این رابطه، بحث اینی که تروریسم از بین بره، دموکراسی نهادی نشه و میریم برای از این لابی میکنین، اولین خواستتان این باشه که ریشه های تمویل اقتصادی طالبان شناسایی و قطع شود.
So you as a students who are going to work with foreign services or like offices that related to international community, you can actually recognize who is actually behind terrorist groups and who is financing them, who is supporting them, and try to, through policy, through policy making, through your activities, through your, like advocacy, just to stop supporters of terrorist group like Taliban. So she's not naming, so I'm adding that she's not naming, but it's really important to understand who is behind all of this, you know, conflict.
شکر فاطمه عزیز. And وقتی که از لحاظ اقتصادی طالب تمویل نشود، ما مطمئن هستیم که این تن میده هم به حقوق بشر، هم به انتخابات، هم به حضور زنان، به خاطری که اینجا دنیا باز برای از پیشرفت میذاره. مثال ایالات متحده میگه خب دخترها به مکتب برگردن، ما کمک میکنیم. تبعیض قومی را برداریم، حکومت مشارکتی ایجاد کنید، ما شما رو تمویل میکنیم. اتحادیه اروپا میگه ما شما رو تمویل میکنیم. یعنی وقتی طالب در تنگنا قرار میگیره از خود انعطاف نشان میده. شما برای از این لابی کنید.
So when actually we stop the supporters of Taliban and we sanction them, then the Taliban don't have anything to rely on. And now is the time for international community and also the US to, you know, just bring prerequisition for them and say, okay, you open girls' school, we giving you this money to you. It's like a carrot and stick approach.
And مرحله بعد میشه که وقتی که از لحاظ اقتصادی اینا یعنی قطع شود مشارکت اقتصادی ازی میتونیم خوشبین باشیم. یک بود تمام شد. مرحله دوم این هست که لابی برای ازی شود با رهبری طالبان از طریق همون نهادهای بین المللی که شماها همراهش نشست میکنین که مدل های زیادی از حکومت اسلامی میانه رو وجود دارند. افغانستان اگر ادعا میکنه طالبان که ما مسلمانیم، خب یکی از اون مدل های میانه رو را برای مردم خود به اصطلاح تمثیل میکنه.
And also the international community can emphasize and just push government of Taliban to choose or select a better, you know, government of Islamic government for Afghanistan. Because the thing that they are now doing and using as a government and Islamic, they call it Islamic country, is not Islamic country. There are a bunch of Islamic countries. They can just go and just talk to them, to sit with them, and just, you know, help them to just build a new one.
ما برای نمونه فقط دو کشوری که خودم از نزدیک دیدم به شما مشورت میدم که اگر علاقمند بودیم کشور اسلامی را یک چند تاش مطالعه کنید، مثل ایران، مثل پاکستان که هردوش کشور اسلامی هستن، ولی میبینیم زنها سر کار میرن، درس میخوانن، طالبان هستن، قانون اساسی دارن.
So we can name some of the countries in the region like Iran, Pakistan, that women are free to go everywhere. They are, you know, government offices, they are in parliaments, so we can use those ones.
I want to make sure we get a little of, if we have some audience questions, if we can help you. Yes.
Yes, hello, my name is Eduardo. Thank you for your presentations. My question is about the foreign assets that the United States and the European Union froze. There's $9 billion frozen in the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. My question is, do you think that we could use this $9 billion as incentives for the Taliban to provide access to women, or is there any way that we could use this money to change the course of action from the Taliban?
Okay, all of you.
Yeah, good question, actually. Last week, I just heard from one of the friends who got a new job in one of these organization, NGOs, to leave her job because Taliban members didn't like her to teach boys, you know, like they're under 18 and they are victims of trafficking, and she was working with that shelter to teach them about art and these things, but they asked her to leave. So my point with this story is it's very hard to, you know, to have a black and white approach to say, okay, we are just giving this money to international organization. But right now, the issue is, international organization have to follow, the Taliban's orders. They cannot. They don't have that freedom. Many of them, they don't have freedom to do what they want. They're coming every day to their offices. They're asking for different things from them. They're just asking for their documents. So that would be actually, if we find a way to separate this, the influence and leverage from Taliban on international community to stop it. That would be a better, I think, approach to go and work with international organizations in Afghanistan. But I'm kind of hesitate to say, it's a possible way.
No.
So you all spoke about the progress that was made sort of the past 10 to 15 years, just, life expectancy, different indicators. Do you think if there's a significant enough sort of generation that grew up during this time that, 10, 20 years, once they come to positions of power, they're going to kind of think back to their child and say, oh, look at the progress they made, let's return to that? Or do you think there wasn't enough time that, there wasn't enough time to make that impact on a generation of people to have leaders one day sort of liberalize in a way once they come to power?
It's a good question. So we just mentioned a lot about last 20 years that we witnessed a lot of changes. We saw new leaders, change makers, and we saw corruption too. 20 years is when you think it's a long term. You have a baby and it's growing like 20 years. But for a country like Afghanistan, it wasn't, it wasn't enough time to see. Just recently, by the pressure from the international community, we had so many government, so many, ministerial positions. But it just happened maybe 3 years ago, to see, okay, we have women in leadership, we have women here, we have girls there, but not, it wasn't enough time to see so much changes. But still, for us, it was really huge achievement. سوالایی است که مثلا شما میگن در این مدت 20 سال زیاد تغییرات آمد. آیا مثلا یک نسل نو ایجاد شد که بیاین در لیدرشپ بازی کنن؟
خب خود جواب دادید. جواب من همین است که بله، مطمئنم که یک نسل نوی در افغانستان شکل گرفت و همون نسل است که امروز همه جا دارن دادخواهی میکنن دیگه. موتا میتونن نگنمونش باشه.
And she's actually agreed with my idea, with my response, and she's saying also, we witnessed, we saw a new generation that just raised with democracy in Afghanistan, and now many of them, they are outside of Afghanistan and they continue advocating. So this is a continued effort.
Just to bolster what they're saying, I mean, the women who went through American University of Afghanistan, they are educated, and for them, there's no going back. And for the young women in the streets who are continuing to protest despite being beaten and worse, there's no going back for them. And so even if you don't have right now what looks like positive change, for an entire generation of Afghan women, there's been such a dramatic change. And so it's all the more difficult to see what is happening because of that. But that investment that they have made in their own futures and in their own education, that is what makes, that is what, brings hope. It is what brings possibility. And so will it? I mean, I don't think anyone can predict that, but has it made an impact? Of course it has.
And what about the brothers of those women who aren't going to go back, or the fathers, in those families? How is it, what kind of support are they getting now? Or is it just, how do we help bolster that?
I mean, there are men supporting, like, who have protested along with their daughters. And, we've seen that. We've seen fathers going to, the provincial leaders, to their, local religious leaders, and saying, you will put my daughter in school.
Yeah, that's true. And also I would add, now girls can go to school, women can go to protest, is a support from the men and their family members. If they don't have that support from them, they cannot even leave their houses. Yeah.
You have some other? Yes, thank you.
Without freedom of press and freedom of speech, how can the international community amplify women's voices from Afghanistan if we can't hear those through a media outlet?
سوال است که میگه وقتی که ما میدیای نداریم در افغانستان، چطور جامعه جهانی میتونه که صدای زنها را بلند بکنه، مثلا صدای زنها را کمک کنم باشون وقتی که این اتفاق نمیفته.
بیار شما درست است متاسفانه، اما ما سوشال میدیا را، شبکه‌های اجتماعی را داریم، این میتونه خیلی کمک باشه. دوی دیگه در تمام نشست‌های بین المللی چی از افغان‌ها که حضور پیدا میکنه، چی شماها که حضور پیدا میکنه، یا نماینده های شما مثل که در پارلمان در کنگره اینا هستن، صدای انسان‌های افغانستان باشه.
Yeah. So that's true that we don't have freedom of expression right now in Afghanistan. So media, because they are just monitoring all of the videos, and they banned some of the international outlets. But social media like Facebook, like Twitter, they are one we can use for our advocacy. And also when you are going for any events about women in Afghanistan, or generally about Afghanistan, and or we are going, inviting for events like this, we can just, I think, bringing more people to raising their voice with us, to not forgetting Afghanistan.
And we do have, here in the US, we still have, while we have a lot of other issues that are going on, we have so many groups that have been engaged with this and have been built up over time. How do they break through here so the kind of attention is given here and in the international community to get that support after the country growing tired of dealing with this? But we know, it's always 2 steps forward, 1 back. So how do we get more attention to that with the investment that's been made? Want Sarah answer a little too, since she's involved in all that?
Yes, I think, one of the things with the U.S. Afghan Women's Council that we have seen over the course of 20 years is that news cycles ebb and flow, but that doesn't mean the news isn't happening. And there are many outlets with which you can listen to Afghan voices directly. Like Laila just said, social media. If you follow on Twitter, there is a enormously active Afghan movement. The Afghan American Foundation, of which some of the founders are members of the council, has regular updates. There are a number of, if you go to the Twitter pages of any of the women here, or of the women that, if you look up, Afghan women and human rights, you will see who's active and who to follow. There are online events. We hold them regularly. And part of what moves media cycles is voices of people like you. And, it isn't to say that at any one time, there are humanitarian issues around the world that are enormously important. But that doesn't mean that you can't dig into more than one at a time. And, this world, and there was a question earlier about what can students do. And one thing you can do is scratch below the surface. International issues are so complex. And, Afghanistan is just one example. It's, you might hear one opinion, but listen for the others. And dig a little bit deeper and try and actually understand what's happening, not just from, think tanks or discussions, but from a variety of sources and from Afghan voices or from voices of that conflict that you're investigating, because that's what will really give you value and insight. It's from those sources and from hearing from people who have actually experienced and have that lived experience.
That's true, yeah.
You can give us your Twitter account so we can make sure we'll follow and follow Sarah and her work and all of and there are so many groups that have been built, and you see the women involved. It's very encouraging when you look at the social media pages. It is filled with women who have come together on this, and it's very inspiring. So to let that be vanquished in any way, and as we're battling things like the education setbacks, and after all that good work, they're still out there. You had to.
Well, I think Sarah mentioned so many good resources. I think also we can also name Amnesty International. You can follow their page too. They are very, they're in contact with so many activists inside of Afghanistan, and they're just sharing the news, good news about the situation, and they're active for, they're just so active against Taliban, which is so great to see, and supporting women inside of Afghanistan. There's one media I can share with you later. It's still working in Afghanistan, but they, you can imagine, they have that supervision from the Taliban, but they're very good too. You can also follow them. They're on Twitter, they're on LinkedIn, everywhere. So their news about what is happening in English and local news. Yeah, there are people who are really working along us. So individuals, you can also, follow Rena Amiri, who is the representative of American government for women and girls of Afghanistan. So there's some people that we can follow and see.
And a number of our organizations continue to work on the ground, from big to large. I mean, the International Rescue Committee is actively reporting, despite being torn in multiple directions because of the conflicts elsewhere. But others of our organizations, like American University of Afghanistan is still very active. The Lamia Afghan Foundation is still doing aid delivery. If you look at Sakina Yakubi's organization, the Sakina Fund, they have organizations throughout, they have workers throughout Afghanistan. The Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace and Security has a very active program. And I think, we at the USAWC continue to work to elevate Afghan women's voices as well, and to help support those programs and a broad variety of individuals working on the ground. Many of them have to be much quieter now. Yep. But they continue to do the work, which is so important. And that's something students can do, is help support those organizations and the work that they're doing.
We've heard so much about the education setback after aiming to say they were going to open, then they didn't. What is the healthcare situation been after all that improvement, and what is the damage that's being done there, and how is that endangering women?
You want to answer?
I mean, USAID and other organizations have been working to put together mobile clinics so that individuals can still receive healthcare, but it has been dramatically decreased, particularly because many of the women nurses, doctors, midwives have not been able to leave their homes.
And, because of the collapse, so many infrastructures also collapsed with that because they were supporting by the international community, like the many hospitals staff were paying by the international organization. They're not paying their salaries. They're not paying, for their equipments or materials to use and medicines to use for their, for the people who are coming to them. And when you're facing with poverty, actually, health coming later, and they don't have so many people in remote
Food is the
areas.
priority. And
Exactly. So many people in remote areas, they don't have money to travel to their destinations. So they have to deal it with themselves. So that is really impacted a lot of the health sector.
People are working really hard to try and address it, but it's one of those really complex issues at this point.
Really.
Great. Well, maybe I'll give all three of our guests some opportunity for some final thoughts, and maybe and we'll share with you these different sites and ways you can follow. Because I always think at least following it on social media and keeping yourself informed is very helpful. But
تشکر. خب گفتنیای ما زیاد افغانا در کل پر حرف هستن، اما من دوست دارم اگر دوستان عزیزی که اینجا هستن کدام چیز خاصی را میخواین از افغانستان قبل از 15 اگست بدانیم را براتان بگم و در این مدت هم که خب خبر تلخ هم میشنوم. ما دوست داریم اگر شما سوالی دارید بپرسید.
Yeah, she's actually opening the floor to you if you want to know anything before the August 15th to 2021. You can ask her about the situation there, and from after that, you hearing everything from the media. But if you have any further questions, please ask her. But if it's my turn, I actually would like to ask you Americans are really have a good opportunities here, and some of the girls in Afghanistan they want to do international exams for English. This is a very small things in your view, but it's a huge things for them to have to be able to leave their country for education. But many of them, they cannot take English classes because it's expensive, or they cannot go out. But they have, some of them, they have internet, and they were asking if students here they're willing to have conversation with them, some sort of mentoring in terms of English. There are some girls in Afghanistan that they are happy. Actually, I would say boys too, because we cannot ignore boys who are willing to come to get out too. So if there are students in your network are happy to do it, I'm just working on kind of initiative to connect the Americans, young generations like you, with Afghans, youngers in Afghanistan who want to do, take exams, English exams, like TOEFL, IELTS, but they need, someone to talk to them or, read their English. So there are people who do that. If you like to, if you know people who are willing to do, you can let me know.
Something else that you can do that's really important is make sure that you welcome the Afghans who are recent arrivals here in the United States. They have some community and some resources, but the more that are on offer, the better that is to help them bridge between Afghanistan and here in the United States and their arrivals, and making sure that, you know, recent arrivals and refugees have a welcoming environment is just so important. And that can be from, you know, getting them to a doctor's appointment, to helping read their resume, to you know, inviting them over for dinner. Very small things, very big things, depending on the commitment that you want to make. But there are a number of organizations working to do it. There are student groups working to do it. But, you know, imagine moving from somewhere you've lived your whole life and coming to a country that's brand new to you. And you can imagine what, you know, and there are things that you might take for granted, like how to set up an internet connection that can be very valuable to others. So, you know, if you're interested, get involved and make use of your time and reach out.
And, you know, when you're engaging with your members of Congress or elected officials, it's something you can raise up too. And all of the sort of constituent services that are offered, you don't have to be, they apply to them also. You don't, oftentimes I would find people, well, I'm not a citizen yet. I said, we can help you. You're here, we can help. And oftentimes they don't know that. But, you know, the faith community often is involved in this, as well as government and all the public-private partnerships. And, you know, we are seeing now with Ukraine, you know, people said, well, we're tired of all this international stuff. We don't want to do this anymore. But now people realize if we're not engaged, we have to be engaged on the world stage. So I'd also encourage you, as you talk to your elected leaders, why you think that's important. Sure, you want the economy, you want your opportunity, you care about, you know, domestic things here, but our role in the international community has never been so important. And this is a prime example of it. And I think it's very helpful for people to hear from electeds to hear from young people that you care about this and that you know people in your community and you want them, you know, and when you hear some of those sort of the ugly voices of Americans saying, I don't care about that, I care about here. We've always been able to do both, and we are better both domestically and internationally in a safer country when we do both. Be active on the international stage, work with our allies, as well as take care of things here at home. It's always been meant to be both. So voice those opinions as you're out there. Just give my opinion that it would be good for elected members at all levels, because your local supervisors can be the ones who are helping, and maybe, you know, the food banks and everything that's there that welcome people when they're in a stressful situation, and then they're trying to get in touch with their families and know where they are. So you can play a great role. You know, even the small parts that you can play do make a difference. So then, and thank you for being here today, and thank our special guests here for your expertise, for your passion, for your courage. And we know that when these voices, you know, stand up, I know you've probably, I'm confident you've encouraged a generation of women, you know, in Afghanistan who will still be out there because of your voices, and we can all help in getting them amplified. So thank you for your courage.
Thank you very much for today. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
already very overwhelmed by the support of Americans. It's
Yes.
really, we cannot ignore it. It was great, it was huge. But as Sarah mentioned, there are people who need more support. So they're just happy to have it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.